Now, for the sake of example, let's say that we want to add another option for a very balanced character to weight in a similar fashion to this condition down here, where we're checking if their difficulty is the default. And let's say that if they weight, they get some kind of stat bonus. We're going to have to make a couple adjustments to our code. One is changing this else block into an else if block. The reason for this being that if we have one more command that will work, we can't simply assume that anything that isn't north, south, or west is going to be east anymore. Now, to separate this out a little bit, let's make this another if block, where we're checking if the input is weight. And HP is 100, or attack is equal to defense. And we're going to do some other stuff here. Now, there are a couple interesting things about this condition. One, as you'll notice here, is that there's this operator here that's 2 ampersands. Now, what is this? Now, this is called a logical operator. A logical operator works with Boolean values. If you'll recall, expressions that use these comparison operators value to a true or false value, which is a Boolean value. These logical operators essentially act as functions upon these Boolean operators. Now, what does the 2 ampersands mean? This means and. So with the and logical operator, in order for the entire expression to evaluate to true, both operands need to be true. Now, what exactly does this mean and what does it look like? Well, let's say that we have a true and a true. This is going to be true because true and true is true. However, by contrast, if we had true and false, this is false because condition 1 has to be true and condition 2 has to be true. The condition 2 is false, so therefore it is not true, and it must be false. Likewise, false and true is also false because the order doesn't matter, and of course false and false. Note that this is not equality, this is and evaluates to false as well. So the only time when and is going to evaluate to true is when condition 1 is true and condition 2 is true. Now, what do we have in here? This, unlike an and, is an or operator. It is also a logical operator. Note that in order to type these vertical bars, you hold shift and press the key for backslash. Now, how does this differ from and? Well, with an or operator, only one of its conditions has to be true. Let's take an example of what that looks like. Well, let's say we have true or true. Of course, this is going to be true. However, if we have true or false, just like as above, except it's or instead of and, if we have true or false, this will be true because only one of the conditions has to be true. Likewise, if it was false or true, it would be true, and if it was false or false, it would be false. So as you can see, the and is a little bit more exclusive, you could say, as opposed to the or operator. Now, in this case, we are wanting to check if the input is weight, and then if it is weight, then we want to also only execute our little stat bonus that we're going to implement here if one of two other conditions is met. If HP is equal to 100, meaning that the difficulty is default, or they did not allocate their stats differently. Now, how are we going to go about giving them this stat bonus? And I will make this a little clearer for you guys to see. This is and or. Now, how do we implement this stat bonus? Well, we can go about it like this. Of course, we can tell them that they are getting that stat bonus. And yeah, in my lore, I will say that your balanced soul sees a new light, gain a stat boost. But of course, it's your text-based game, so you can write whatever you want here. Now we can give them a bonus 100 HP, and let's say we, for their attack, are going to give them a little slightly random boost to their attack. Now the way we're going to write this out is math.floor math.random times 5. Now, hold on a minute. What is all this math.floor and math.random shenanigans? Well, take note that we have been using this console.log this whole time to get stuff out of the console, and recall that I noted earlier that console is sort of like a built-in thing in JavaScript that we are harkening back to and saying, hey, what can you do? You can log, do this logging for me. It's a very similar idea here, where let's take a look at this math.random. Math is a built-in object or a global object in JavaScript. You can think of it almost like a little library of built-in utilities for you to use. Now, from that little library of utilities, we're saying, okay, what do you have? Well, you got a random function that'll return a random value between 0 and 1. Note how it gives you a little note here. Very convenient. And in order to tell it to execute that function, we type an empty set of parentheses here, because we don't actually have to give it any additional information. Now, how does this relate to this times 5? Well, if math.random is giving us a value between 0 and 1, then we multiply it by 5, it's going to give us a proportional value out of 5. So let's say that it gave us 0.2, right? And we tried to figure out, okay, well, how much is 0.2 of 5, or 20% of 5, you could say. That would be 1, right? So this would, in effect, give us a value of 1 if the random happened to come up with 0.2. Of course, it'll vary because it is a random number. Secondly, there is this math.floor component. Floor essentially rounds down. So let's say that it gave us something that wasn't evenly an integer of 5. So let's say that we needed to get 0.15 times 5. Obviously, that isn't going to work out to an even number, and therefore we need to round it in order for our stats to maintain their nice, even look. Now we can do the same thing here with defense. Defense gets a boost of math.floor, math.random times 5. And let's not forget our semicolon. Now, note that this math.random times 5 is inside of this math.floor's parentheses. We are passing in what is known as an argument, and we'll go over this in more detail in our functions video. But suffice it to say right now, in a very similar fashion to our log statement where we're telling you, okay, this is what we are going to do the logging with, this is what we're going to do the flooring with, this is what we are rounding down. For now, that is a sufficient idea of what that means. So let's try this out. We'll go over there and reload our game. I refuse to pick any other name than Nuggets. And let's say we have our difficulty adjustment of 1. Note that I did change the stats a bit, but however, the HP is still 1. So at least one of these conditions is met. And if I type wait, your balanced soul sees a new light and gains a stat boost. Now, I encourage you to get creative and try adding all kinds of conditions for different scenarios that you might want to explore in your game. At this point, you can really make any kind of command that you want and provide basically any result that you want. So, do feel free to get creative and make this game your own.